Welcome to the Echo and Encourage podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Abbott, and I'm honored to have you here. This is the place where we talk about things that echo eternity and encourage everyone. Whether you're looking for powerful strategies to grow on your personal journey or the best tips to flourish in every area of your life, you're in the right spot. Let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the Echo and Encourage podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Abbott, and today we have Jennie, Adrena-Jen Milton, Aussie extreme athlete and extreme courage coach. I am so excited for you to hear from Jennie today. Thank you so much for coming, Jennie.
Hi, Hannah. How's it going? I am super excited to be chatting with you today and also your audience. This is so exciting.
Yay! It is going wonderfully. It's just awesome to get to see you again. I met you online through, Jess Ekstrom's Mic Drop Academy and had the privilege of getting to be in small groups with you and working out ideas. And every interaction with you is just filled with vibrance and empowering joy. So thank you for being the authentic Adrena-Jen you that you are.
Oh, thank you so much, Hannah. I feel the same way about you.
Thank you, Jennie. Well, there's so many things that we could talk about. We could talk about your book that is empowering young people. We could talk about extreme sports and how you help women courageously go forth with their conquering their fears. And I think, how about let's start there. What got you into talking about conquering fears and pairing that with extreme sports?
Well, great question, Hannah. I'll go right back to the beginning, which is I grew up in Australia, in the capital city, which is Canberra, Australia. And I am so lucky and grateful that my mum and dad had a sports store from when I was born. My mum tells stories about having me in the bassinet and putting me under the counter while she served customers. And so my brother and I, every day after school, would go into the shop and we would entertain ourselves by checking out all the latest sporting equipment and watching the videos of people doing these sports. And we were so lucky that our parents were extremely sporty. So every school holidays in the wintertime, we would go skiing. Yes, we have skiing in Australia. Many people don't know that, but we have the Australian Snowy Mountains, which was about 3 hours drive from Canberra. So we would go skiing on the weekends or in our school holidays. And then in the summer, my dad was a sailor and he loved to sail. And as my brother and I got bigger as we grew, the boats got bigger to compensate our size. And eventually we were actually in an ocean sailing ketch sailing up and down the east coast of Australia, out of sight of land. And so when I was a young little girl, I was actually the school scaredy cat. That little girl in the class that was always hesitant to do everything. That little girl that didn't want to jump off the diving board in swimming class. And so I wasn't always fearless. People sort of see pictures of me these days skiing big mountains or kite surfing in huge waves and go, wow, she's just naturally fearless. And that's not the case. I was an absolute self-confessed scaredy cat. Okay. And my mum has many stories she could share if she was here today. But I think skiing, which was our main sport as a kid, mum and dad sold ski gear in the shops. And my brother actually started training to become a ski racer when he was about 9. I became a ski instructor at the age of 14, and that's where I actually started learning to teach and to coach people. But skiing is such a great sport that gives us the opportunity to build our skills and also build our courage and fear tolerance in a very methodical step-by-step way. They start you off on what's called the green runs, and the green runs aren't very steep. They're quite easy, and that's where you have your first lessons and you learn to snowplow, and you have to learn how to control your speed and how to stop. And once you get to that stage, you can hop on a lift lift that takes you a bit further up the mountain, and you get to go on a blue run. And the blue runs are super scary when you first get there. But with some practice and some time and some lessons, the blue runs become fun, and you get faster and you start carving some turns. And then they take you to the black runs. Oh my goodness, the black runs are renowned in the restaurants and bars at the end of the day. People talking about, oh my God, I went down a black run. And those black runs really challenge our our courage. We have to find the courage to go down a much steeper mountain that might have moguls on it, and there's people who are really good skiers going really fast past you. And then you get to the double black diamond runs, which are even harder again. And so what a great sport to actually teach us to increase our courage step by step as our skills improve too.
This is incredible. I had no clue that there were all of these different types of levels. I must confess, I've only made it to the Buddy Hill.
Well, the bunny hill, the green runs. You've got your green shirt on today, so very
Yes.
appropriate.
You know what, Jenny? I actually would put my hands on that ski rope and what was it? I'd clog or stop the line. They'd say, everybody stop. We got to help her again. I don't know what I was doing wrong, but I was entertained on what did you call it? The Green Hill?
Green runs,
Green
yeah,
Run.
that's right.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'm inspired to revisit a green run someday. Maybe I'll visit you and hire you to be my green run tour guide to get me up to another color. Wow. So, what got you from that place of you identified as a scaredy cat as a young girl, and then you just burst out of that into this new identity?
I think it was a lot of the reason was because of my brother. Now, I don't know about you guys at home, or you, Hannah, whether you've got a brother or not, or a sibling that you are competitive with, but my brother and I were super competitive from a very young age. And I've already mentioned that my brother got into ski racing. So, of course, he was building his skills, his courage, and his competitiveness. And he's 2 years younger than me. And so having a brother that's younger than you and better at you than things is not a good look. So we were actually always competing with each other for everything we did all year round in all the different sports that we did. And what I haven't shared with you is that when my brother was 9, he actually was diagnosed with cancer. And that was a very traumatic time in my life. And I actually talk about it in my children's book, Gail and the Red Kite of Courage, is based on that time in my life when the whole family was shocked that my brother had cancer and he had to have his leg amputated, and there was only a 10% chance that he would actually live. And so it was very, very traumatic for our family at that stage. But everything went well. He had his leg amputated. They put him through chemotherapy. And my mum and dad actually knew the head of the ski school, and they had a disabled skier program. So while he was still bald, putting on a beanie to stay warm, they actually got him up skiing and teaching him how to ski on one leg. And so when I said he was doing ski racing training, he was actually racing on one leg using outriggers, which are like crutches with little skis on the bottom. And he was pushing himself so hard to be normal, get that experience of speed, compete with other kids that had 2 legs and actually beat them. It made him feel like that his amputee, having one leg was not a disability. And that was his mindset of overcoming that. And so not only was I competing with my brother, who was really a natural sports person, but I was competing with him on one leg. And so I had no excuses. I couldn't use any excuse that I couldn't do something, because he was proving that we could even do it on one leg. But we also started getting this very much a MacGyver mindset of how are we going to figure out when a new sport came into Mum and Dad's sports store, how are we going to figure out how he could do that on one leg. How could he rollerblade? Pushing with his crutches. And I was a really good rollerblader. So I remember teaching him how to rollerblade on one leg. And how I did that was I took one skate off too. So I ended up skiing on one leg, rollerblading on one leg, and doing everything with him just to prove that it could be done sometimes. And so we had a very fun, competitive MacGyver childhood. And my brother actually went on to be an absolute superstar in Australia. He's in the Australian Sporting Hall of Fame. He has an Order of Australia. He has won international awards, and he actually is the fastest one-legged skier in the world. He holds the world speed skiing record on one leg. He got 3 gold medals in every single discipline in Salt Lake City at the Paralympics. And so he is an absolute superstar and an inspiration to me as his sister.
Whoa, I've had goosebumps for so many moments as you've been sharing this. This is incredible. I love how you phrased it, the MacGyver mindset. That was one of my favorite shows. So sad that they discontinued it. And to take that resilience mindset, to think outside of the box, to go against all odds and to create possibilities out of things where it looks so arduous, challenging, and hopeless, but then to bring hope into it and to empower other people. What a testimony of courage. And to be able to have a brother that did that. It was a role model. And then, wow, I'm so excited for everyone who is in this sports world and who is looking at the ability and not the disability within their story and situation, that they've got his story to look up to. Thank you for sharing that, and how you were able to then write a book from it. At what point in your well, did you release this book recently, or has it been out in Barnes and Noble a while now?
Well, I'm excited that it's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and it just was published in November 2024. So it hasn't been that long, and it was a project that happened very, very quickly because I actually had a life-threatening situation myself, and I'll be honest, I'll be vulnerable, I'll tell you. I was diagnosed with brain aneurysms in January 2024. I didn't even know what a brain aneurysm was, but it's where the walls of your arteries in your brain become weak and the blood pressure starts blowing them out. And most people don't find out they've got them. They've got headaches, they take medication for their headaches, and all of a sudden that aneurysm ruptures and they have a stroke, and they have to deal with the aftermath of the stroke. I am so grateful that I was gifted the test that made these aneurysms show up before they ruptured. And 2 weeks later, I was in for my first brain surgery to fix the aneurysms. 2 weeks later, another operation to fix the next aneurysm. And this was one of the scariest things in my life. I mean, I'm sure as we're talking, you'll hear some other experiences that have been scary in my life, being caught in avalanches, chased by polar bears. But having brain surgery was a real life fear that I had no control over. And I was so scared going into this, and I was pulling out all of my mindset tools that I'd learned from therapy over the years. And I was, telling myself, be brave, be strong, you're loved, right? You're lucky. You're grateful. I am the storm, building up this courage that I've used in my extreme sports, but dealing with brain surgery was just something I was so scared of. And I remember waking up in ICU later that day after my brain surgery, and when I woke up, the first thing I saw was Jesus on the cross on the wall. And it was a spiritual moment like I'd never had before. I was just so grateful to be alive. and I looked down at my own wrists, and I had all of my IV needles poking out of both of my wrists, and I looked at Jesus on the cross nailed up by his wrists, and it was just a moment that is really hard to describe. And at that moment, I realized that I had been saved, and I had been saved for a reason. And I was like, wow, I've been saved for a reason. It's not my time to go. And God has something more for me to do. It's my time to serve, to give back. You know, what is that? What is that lesson? And I realized that I had skills to overcome fear from all of my sports that I'd done in the past, and all of these experiences that I had been gifted, that had put my fear tolerance to the limit. And I had found the courage dial on myself to turn it on when I needed to. And I realized that this was my time to share my stories, share these lessons that I'd learned, and help people overcome their fears. And because we all have fears that we experience every day, we fear that we're not good enough. We have a fear of failure. We have a fear of survival. There's so many fears that we all experience every day, and I really felt like it was my job to serve and to help others overcome those fears. And I made a decision in those first moments, I was going to write a book. And I don't actually read a lot. I'm not much of a reader myself, and I never considered myself, you know, intellectual or getting good marks at school. So writing a book was something that I hadn't considered before, and I thought to myself, I can write a children's book. And I can keep my language simple, and I can share my lessons, and I can share that story of when I was 11 and my brother lost his leg, and how I had gotten depressed. I had withdrawn from society. I was staying in my room. I wasn't doing any of my sports. And that was a really, really hard time in my life. And how, when my brother got home, he actually bought me a kite for my birthday. And my dad, who was a sailor, took me outside and helped me learn to fly this kite. And that gave me courage. By overcoming the fear of flying a kite, I discovered that fear was the problem, but courage was the solution. And you know what? Confidence was the reward of overcoming that fear. And this book also talks about my relationship with my best friend. My best friend became the wind, and I would listen to the wind outside my window, and I used to be scared of it, with the scary trees blowing in the window, just like in your background there, Hannah. And all of a sudden, learning to fly a kite, I felt like I was dancing with the wind. And then every time I heard the wind or saw the wind moving something, I thought, it's asking me to come out and play. And so this book really helps children see ways of building courage. It gives them a relationship with the wind and the weather, and it tells my story of how I found my courage and confidence by flying a kite. And there's this incredible illustration in the book that is of my brother and I flying kites together. And it says that, you know, we both overcame our struggles and challenges and found courage together. And there's not too many illustrations in children's books of one-legged kids. So, you know, it's really introducing kids that even if something bad goes wrong, like losing a leg to cancer, that we can still go on and do anything we want to in this life. There's a bio in the back about me becoming, you know, one of the world's top kite surfers and snow kiters. And there's a bio in the back about my brother becoming the Olympic champion, and a picture of him skiing, really to give those kids inspiration of what something we learn to do as a child can take us in later life.
This is powerful, Jenny, Adrena-Jen. This is it's so powerful, and I'm so proud of you. You've endured a lot of pain and trauma, and you've looked to Jesus for strength, healing, and hope, and you've just gone full force into leading by example about how everything you can live a restored life full of dreams coming true, no matter the adversity that you've gone through. And to give children that hope at a young age is transformational. It will change the trajectory of their life. I'd love to get this book and read it to the kids that sometimes we watch a tiny snippet of a podcast guest and then we read their book together in speech therapy. And so I can't wait to just go over your book with them. A lot of them, they have things like autism spectrum disorder, different things like speech issues, but um, they'll understand and get to relate, and it's so applicable and relevant to everyone. I think whether you're a child or an adult, this book. And thank you for sharing that. So, do you mind me asking, are your brain aneurysms healed at this point? Everything's taken care of and stable. Are you getting any pain from that healing process?
I'm happy to share with you. I'm just so amazed and grateful that we live in this generation where they have the tools, the machinery, and the skills to have these brain surgeons that can go into our brains and actually fix things, right? Maybe only 5 or 10 years ago, they would have had to cut open my scalp, move my brain aside in order to fix them. These days, they actually went through my groin and put cameras and tools up my femoral artery, up my neck into my brain, and the doctor is looking at a screen and driving things around all the arteries, which is just, it still blows me away. Blows me
Yes.
away that they can actually do that. I ended up having a few complications and had a third brain surgery in August 2024. But I'm super happy to say that only a couple of weeks ago, I went in for what's called an angiogram, which is where they go back into the femoral artery and they put a camera up there to look. And ultimately, the big aneurysm at the back has healed. There's some stents in place that is diverting the blood flow away from the edges. The second aneurysm has a couple of little issues, but I can live with that for now. I have been suffering some headaches recently, and headaches can just be so debilitating. And I really have had to learn to look after myself and to give myself that self-care when I need it. I think as a teenager into my 20s, 30s, and 40s, if I got a headache, I would just pop a couple of Tylenols and just ignore it and just keep doing what I'm doing. But now I know that this is a sign from the universe. If I have a headache, this is my time to rest, to heal, to recover, and really allow myself to. I used to say do nothing, but you're not doing nothing. If you are lying there and you're not actually achieving those things you wanted to do on your day, that is not something to get down about. You are actually spending time healing, recovering, and honoring your self care. And so I think this has really taught me. They say there's always positives and negatives, and I always find them this I've had a couple of months where I have had to rest a lot. That has been something that I really needed to learn, a lesson from above.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. It's so good that you're listening to your body. And it is so true that there is so much healing that can be done through rest, whether it's a power nap or quality sleep, just meditating. There's so many healing things that the body does through that. You are a warrior. I am so proud of you. So you decided to write this book as you're waking up, it sounds like, from your surgery, and you're seeing that picture of Jesus on the cross, and you're seeing the IVs in your hands, and you're inspired to tell your story. Is that right? That's when it all clicked?
It was a moment of such clarity that I had never had before. You'd think after having brain surgery that the brain would be foggy, but I had so much clarity of what I had to do, and I realized how short life was. And I had a chance to share my stories in children's books, on the stage, on podcasts. I mean, you are giving me the chance today, Hannah, to achieve my mission of sharing my stories with more people out there to inspire and create an impact and give them hope. And so this is all part of that moment of clarity. And a quote from Tony Robbins just kept going round and round in my head. And he had said in some training that I'd done recently, is there more knowledge in a graveyard or a library?
Hmm.
What do you think the answer to that one is, Hannah?
Whew. Wow.
I'll tell you what I
Okay.
thought. I thought there is definitely more knowledge in a graveyard, that so many people really don't get a chance to share their stories, share
Yeah.
their knowledge, share their experiences, and they take that with them to the grave. And I
Mhm.
decided that I had been gifted such an exciting life of experiences that I would be doing people a disservice if I didn't share these stories. And I had just survived one brain surgery, and there was another brain surgery 2 weeks later. Would I survive that one? Would I, have a stroke in those 2 weeks? So I felt a lot of urgency that I had to do this quickly, and I had to really go for it, be motivated, and because I needed to leave a legacy, leave those stories in a library, and before it's my time to go to that graveyard.
Yes. That's where my gut was leading to. I was thinking of a graveyard and the times I've visited graveyards. That's where my mind went to, and just seeing a few words on the tombstone, or even thinking about, I have a family member who was cremated and there's no words there. It's just a box, and then ended up being buried in a garden. But wow, there are so many stories untold there. And I'm so, so glad that you've decided to use your voice and to share your story so that it can be echoed throughout countless libraries and places. The courage there is so wonderful. I love that, Jenny. Thank you for being this role model and example to us. Would you share, Jenny, what are some practical tips our listeners can try out if they are finding themselves stuck in fear? Fear that maybe they're not good enough to show up and write the book that they want to, or fear that because they have health challenges, that maybe it's too dangerous to live life to the fullest. What are some of your insights or tips on that?
I would love to share that, Hannah. I've got a few different answers for this, and it really depends on where you're at, especially with your health. But I think that my sports comes back into play. If we can find if we're scared of something, and sometimes that fear is just so big, and we feel the stress, we feel a little bit of anxiety, that's our primal fear response kicking in. And when our primal fear response kicks in, we either want to fight, right? We want to flight, or we want to freeze. And when that happens, it's very, very difficult to actually get out of that. We go into this survival mindset, and sometimes those fears, like writing a book, you're not going to die if you start writing a book, right?
Yeah.
If we really get down to the nitty gritty, is that fear something that you're going to lose your life and you need to have your survival instinct kick in, like being chased by a polar bear,
Right.
right? Or is it something that we've built up to be bigger than it actually is? So if we can actually just leave that aside for a second, that thing that's scaring us, and find something else that maybe we can challenge ourselves with. right? I love the word challenge because a challenge is something that we can choose, and maybe it's riding a bike if you haven't done it for a while. Maybe it's going swimming, and you're like, oh, I'm not a very good swimmer. Okay, I'm gonna, force myself to do something that I don't normally do, right? That's a challenge. You can make it as big as you want. You can go skydiving if you want to. You can go skiing and go to that blue run. And if we can challenge ourselves to do something that's just a little bit out of our comfort zone, and we can find the courage, right? This is the key secret. We need to eliminate that primal fear response and find courage. You've already said the warrior word. We need to find that warrior
Yes.
mindset, right? We
Yes.
are a warrior. We are stronger than we think. And find the courage to actually do that challenge. Boy, oh boy, see what happens next, because all of a sudden you are going to be filled with confidence. Because once we overcome a challenge, right, using courage, confidence fills our veins, and it feels so good. I feel proud of myself when I overcome a challenge, something that I thought I couldn't do before. And once we feel confident, that can give us the confidence to then do another fear. Let's turn that fear into a challenge and challenge ourselves to write a page of the book. Let's challenge ourselves to go live on Facebook. Let's challenge ourselves to ask the boss for a raise, okay? And look at it as a challenge and just do it. You're not going to die if it doesn't if it doesn't work out, right? Okay, but if it does work out, or even if it doesn't work out, you're going to be proud of yourself and feel more confidence in yourself to then achieve more challenges in the future.
I love that. Yes. I love that you get the reward of confidence with each bit of courage that you go for. I'm sitting on the edge of my seat, Jenny. Will you tell me about this avalanche or this polar bear? What happened?
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Well, I spend a lot of time in Alaska. Remember I was telling you about you get to that Black Diamond Run? Well, what
Yes.
comes after the Black Diamond Run?
Is it
Heli skiing in Alaska. And you get this helicopter up to the top of this big mountain in Alaska, and there's no ski patrol, but you have this amazing heli guide that specializes in avalanches. And I remember the first time I did that, that was my challenge. And boy, when I landed on top of that mountain, there was so much excitement, and the mountains were so beautiful. I was filled with this incredible energy from just being there. And then the helicopter, it flew away. And I remember standing on top of this mountain and then going, oh, I have to ride down this mountain now, and that's when that excitement turned back into fear. And I like to say, be careful what we wish for, because it might just happen. That
oh,
was so far outside my comfort zone that that fear really kicked in. But then I had a radio on, and the guide had already dropped in, and he said, okay, one at a time, come down to me. I'll tell you when to go. And so the next guy went, and then it was my turn. And I remember him going, okay, Jenny, your turn. 3, 2, 1, dropping. And so I really didn't have a choice to hesitate. There were people behind me that still had to go. And so I had no choice, and I dropped in. And I was on a snowboard back then, and I remember dropping in and doing a couple of turns, and then all of a sudden I went over the handlebars and I started flipping in this powder snow. And there were a lot of things going through my head, but I realized that my snowboard was too short. It was designed for Australian snow, which is not very deep. And all of a sudden I'm in Alaska powder, which you need a bigger board. And so I'd gone over the handlebars. And so for a second, I was like, oh no, this is the worst case scenario. And then the next thing that happened, maybe it's because I've got good balance, or maybe it was just a sign from above, but I landed back on my snowboard, right? And I'm still going. I'm like, whoa, what just happened? And I rode down to the bottom And the guys down there, they were cheering. I don't know if they thought I did it on purpose, like a trick or something, but I got down the bottom and I just burst into tears. I was the only girl in the group, and I just had so much emotion that I burst into tears, and it wasn't tears of sadness. It was just raw emotion pouring out of me in these tears. I was so proud of myself that I'd overcome this fear. I'd found that courage. I had done what I said I was going to do, and I was doing it. I was doing it. And that heli ski guide, his name's Jerry, and it's been over 20 years since that moment, and I still speak with Jerry, and he, out of all the hundreds of thousands of people he's taken heli skiing, he still recalls that moment because it was just so powerful for him to see how much it meant to me and how much emotion was just coming out at that particular time. Wild, huh? And now that wasn't the avalanche story or the polar bear story, but that was definitely one of my stories of me having to find that courage. And boy, was I empowered after that. And it was only actually a few days later that I went out to do it again. And that's the cool thing, that if you find a fear or challenge, we should call it, and we find that courage, right? And our confidence starts building. If we can repeat that, right? If we can practice, it's like an athlete going to the gym. If we can work that courage muscle so that we can call it up when we need to, we it's not as scary anymore. And so I remember standing on the next peak and, oh, I'm just going to drop in and I'm going to ride this mountain. And it started becoming really fun until one day I was on the mountain with a film crew, which was very exciting. They were filming for a movie, and I had this female videographer there, and they had a couple of pro athletes, and she and I had dropped into the mountain first and stopped. We wanted to film. I was an amateur photographer back then. And these two athletes they decided they would hike up the mountain and then they would drop in and we were going to film them coming down. It all looks great in our minds. But these guys were walking up along the top of the mountain, and mountains in Alaska are way bigger than you think. And they came close to the edge, and it was a cornice. Now, a cornice is where the wind has blown the snow over the edge, and so the snow is like overhanging. And so their body weight standing on that cornice actually made the cornice break. And they jumped back. They were okay. We didn't know until later, but they were okay. But she and I were on the mountain, and we saw this huge piece of cornice just break and land on the snow. And then all of a sudden, the whole mountain started breaking apart, and it was a huge avalanche. And she just froze. Her primal fear response was freeze, which was actually a really good thing because the guide had put us in a spot where we would be safe if there was an avalanche. But my primal fear response is flight. I wanted to run away, and so I started moving, and I actually moved myself into the flowing snow, and I got dragged over a cliff. I ended up with a hematoma on my ass, and ended up like actually not being tumbled in the snow like you would think in this avalanche. I was actually like sitting on top of this big block that was just sliding down the hill, and I was watching these blocks go off another bigger cliff in front of me. And eventually those blocks started stacking up, and I ended up stopping on the top of this cliff. And I was able to see the powder blast, it's called. That's when the snow comes down the mountain, and then at the bottom it hits the ground and went over 2,000 feet in the air. It was one of the biggest avalanches the guides had ever seen. Now, there was a guide at the top of the mountain. My friend Jerry was there once again at this emotional moment, and I had the radio on, and I heard him say, "I can see Jennie. she's okay. She's okay. I'm like, okay, good. I'm okay. I'm okay. Because I really didn't know if I was in a dangerous spot or what was going to happen. Was the mountain going to keep sliding? He said, she's okay. And then he was able to come down and rescue the other girl. And I was able to compose myself and get myself out of that situation. But it's one of the scariest times in my life. If you listen to my keynote speech, I'm telling my stories on stages. I have this photo that I took. I took a selfie of myself at that moment, and the emotion on my face of just fear and tears and shock. I mean, it's not the most beautiful selfie I've ever got of myself, but it definitely conveys that emotion of just so much fear at that particular time. And so I'm lucky to have survived. I'm lucky to have so much respect for the mountain. I think ignorance is bliss when you don't know what can go wrong, and that was the stage I was at when I first started. I then went on to do all my avalanche training, do my training to become a backcountry guide. I married one of the heli ski guides who's an avalanche professional. And so I get to spend a couple of months in Alaska every year. And I now guide people in the mountains, teach them about avalanches and keep them safe so that they can get out there and experience some skiing and some snowboarding and some snow kiting on the mountains. So, yeah, that was definitely a pivoting moment in my life.
Thank you for sharing that. This is riveting. This is, I feel like, more intense and engaging than, these adventure movies. This is real life. And was it after that trip that you met your now husband?
It was. Oh my gosh, that was such a special moment. I remember meeting him on my first heli ski trip on that trip, and I thought he was really cute. And then I came back 2 years later, and on my second trip up there, and I remember chatting with him again. He remembered my name. I walked into the office, and he's like, "Jenny, you're back," and like, ooh, this the cute, sexy Ellie guy knows my name. And we ended up chatting and realizing that we had quite a bit in common. We both loved wind sports. He was a windsurfer, and I'd grown up windsurfing. That was one of the sports we had in our store. And we both had kites with us. And my plan was to go heli skiing and then fly to Hawaii to have a kiteboarding lesson to learn how to fly this kite. And he had a couple of kites with him too. And one day when it was stormy and the helicopter couldn't fly and he had the day off, he said, "Hey, let's go and fly our kites with our snowboards on and see if we can get towed around." And so we did that. We went out and we got towed around flying the kites. I was very out of control because I hadn't had my lessons yet. But that day I was able to fall in love with this new sport called snow kiting. I was combining my love of snowboarding and my love of sailing wind sports, and they came together, and I was essentially sailing on snow. And I also fell in love with that sexy heli ski guide. His name's Steve, and we have now been married for 17 years, I think,
Oh.
and more in love today than ever before. So I found my soulmate that day too.
Oh, congratulations, and I'm so proud of you. You conquered your fears, you're courageous, you're confident, and then this led you into a beautiful marriage that is flourishing and thriving. I already have so many follow-up questions for you that I think I'd love to have you again as a return guest, and I'd love to have our listeners write in questions where what questions do you have? Even my dogs just came over. They're like wagging their tails like, "Yes, we want Jenny to come back. We love her." So, yes, your wisdom, your courage, the confidence that you help us get through your joyful stories through overcoming adversity and fear is truly phenomenal. How do people get to hear you? How do our listeners connect with you?
I would love to connect with people, so please reach out. Don't be scared. Maybe that can be your first challenge. Reach out to Adrena-Jen and say, "Hi, I heard you talk with Hannah on the podcast, and tell me your favorite part of the stories that I've told." And I would love to connect with you. You can do that on most of the social media channels. I'm on Facebook as JennieMilton.com. You can find me Adrena-Jen on Instagram. I have two websites, Adrena-Jen and Jennie Milton, so you can find me there. So please send me a DM, or send me an email. Please reach out and say hello, or maybe come visit me in Alaska and I'll teach you how to fly a kite.
Oh, yes. I'm already thinking of my friends, my dear close friends who are away on a snowboarding trip right now. And they're going to love this episode. I think they're going to want to visit you, especially. My one piece of advice to them was beware of the tree wells. That's the only piece of advice I know about
That's a good
skiing so
one.
far. And so
That's definitely good advice, Hannah.
you you may be getting visitors from our neck of the woods. Oh,
I
thank
would love
you.
that. I
Thank
would
you,
love that.
Adrena-Jen. Can't wait to get your book. Can't wait to connect with you again. And I'm so excited for everyone who's listening to have now tools and stories that are going to help them turn their fear into courage and then confidence. So thank you for your testimony. And Jennie, what's one way we can echo eternity or encourage others?
Well, Hannah, thank you so much for having me today. I've really loved chatting with you and telling you all these stories. And I love that it's not goodbye, it's to be continued, to
Mhm.
be continued on another podcast. But I would love people to absorb some of my energy, and I'm sharing some courage with you to overcome some of those fears. And I hope that you can echo it back, because I'm here to encourage you whenever you need it.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon, Adrena-Jen. It's so lovely every time that I get to interact with you. Excited for each person to keep growing in their confidence because of your story. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks, Hannah. See you soon.
See you soon. Thanks so much for joining me today on the Echo and Encourage podcast. I hope this inspired you and gave you a fresh perspective. If you loved today's episode, hit that subscribe button, rate, and leave a review. Your support helps this encourage more people. Connect with us on social media or visit our website for more resources to help you live your best life. See you next time.